Greetings and welcome to Terra Prime Live. My name's E-Rock, and tonight we're going to be talking about the first 4 forms of lightsaber combat. And we're just a discourse here. And joining us this evening, we have, starting off here with, of course, with our master first, Master Artorius Vidnal. We have Ed. Ed, hello.
Hi, guys.
Cool. And we also have David, or Thonolin. From the Great White North, like me. How you doing tonight?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Excellent, thanks. Always happy on a Friday. And also joining us this evening, who's just joining us here from the UK. We'll let him just get set up here, but good evening, Gary. Count Arcanus.
Good evening, Eric. Good evening, everyone. Made it just.
Excellent. We have technical troubles, but Count Arcanus strikes again. We'll discuss how to solve computer issues using forms 5, 6, and 7 during another episode. But anyway, yes. So the first thing we'd like to do is just discuss the first 4 forms, just what they are. Form 1, of course, being Shicho, where it all begins with the younglings and all of that. Everybody should start there, just because it is the basics of lightsaber combat, swordplay, if you will. Form 2 is Makashi, and that's primarily a counter to Form 1. Then we have Form 3, which is Soresu, completely defensive, very flowing. I don't know too much about it because I'm still on Makashi, but we've looked ahead a little bit, and it's a very flowing form. And then the power form, Form 4, Ataru, which a couple of my fellow apprentices had the honor of saying that they're studying right now. So, yes. So, anyway, let's discuss the first form here, which is, of course, Shicho. And let's just start off by just talking about what it's all about. Who cares to go first tonight?
I'll go first.
Let me get that cricket in the corner there. Okay, there.
I'll start off. Ed's just sitting there shaking his head like I'm not going first. You guys step up. So when it comes to Shicho, for me, it starts off as the basics. Is the opening, how to hold your weapon, how to stand with your weapon, how to step and move with your weapon, how to do your basic strikes as it comes down to it. And then as you progress through mastery, you become, I guess Scott describes it as like flowing like water. You can be extremely dangerous using very basic movements and very basic strikes by literally just leading your opponent where you want them to be. Your life relies on the basics. I mean, the most basic thing in your life every day is breathing, and your life relies on that. Think of your basic strikes and your basic combat as your breathing when you're doing that. Your movement, your basic Shicho movement, is going to be what leads you through your life and within swordplay, and then your strikes are kind of come with it. So that's kind of my approach to Shicho as a start.
Excellent. Sorry, thanks, Dave. Gary, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll jump in on this because obviously knowing that we had the show tonight, I wrote down a few little notes about each of the 4 forms as my, like yourself, obviously, as someone who's studying Form 2 at the moment, sort of my understanding from what I'd seen and obviously the stuff I've done with the first 2 forms. For Shicho, what I've basically got it down as is basic movement, stepping, timing, simple footwork, simple blade work. You've got 3 guards. You've got your 4 strikes. The blocks are more kind of hard blocks. You're kind of stopping force with force. It's kind of uncomplicated, but as Dave was alluding to there, it's elegant. Its higher levels can be just exquisite in their, in the way that they're done, even though it is, relatively sort of simplistic in terms of the actual formula. Done extremely well, it can look amazing. Another little thing which kind of came to mind as I was thinking about this was the shape of each of the forms. For Shicho, to me, it seems a bit like a square or a cube, because you're kind of blocking to your outsides and above and what have you, and then you're striking from the edges inwards. So you do a block to one side and then retaliate by coming from the outside and across. So I mean, yes, it is the most basic form, but there's a lot to it. Even though you've got these kind of simple elements, it doesn't mean that it's easy. I must admit, one of the most humorous quotes I ever heard about this was from one of the other apprentices. I think it was Robert. I think it was Arinthius, who said, "How to hold a saber and not fall down," which I found hilarious. But it does kind of sum up where you start with Shicho. It's kind of, how do I hold this thing and not fall on my backside? But from there, there's just levels and levels and levels of it. So that's kind of my take on Shicho.
Excellent. All right, Ed, would you like to chime in on the Shicho, please?
Sure. There's a lot of different ideas with Shicho, and the way that I've always approached it is this. It is the basics. We start there because it's, like Gary said, how to hold a saber and not fall on your bottom. At the same time, it's a time where you should be developing your personality with a lightsaber, your comfort zone, understanding how it functions and how you function with it. So while we're talking about learning the basic moves that will set up what you're going to do later, we're also talking about understanding how those moves work. And that happens throughout the entire process, but you're really in the Shicho time trying to understand, when I move my wrist like this, the blade does that. When I move my elbow, the blade does this. At the same time, I want to bring up a very commonly used and paraphrased martial arts thought. In the beginning, a punch is just a punch. Towards the middle, the punch is a block and a takedown and many things. But at the end, a punch is just a punch. That's what I'll say for that.
How profound. Thank you, sir. And yeah, I guess well, my take on Shicho. I am an Lx Apprentice, by the way, and also tonight's host, but that's beside the point. Yeah, that's. I remember when I first got into this sabering racket, I was just spinning my saber, and I bumped into Terra Prime and saw a lot of the forms that they had done, and they actually recommended that I start with Shicho and learn the basics that way. And even just joking around and spinning my saber, everything seemed to just work better. And spinning became what was laborious. Made my shoulder sore and my elbow. Yeah, it spread all of that distribution throughout my body. And spinning the saber was a whole body affair rather than just an arm affair, and it was crazy. It made everything, like, how can just side strikes and all of the just the first form, how because it is the basics. Even just spinning your saber. So yeah, what started out as fun turned into this serious martial arts study. It seems it's yeah, I love it. And without Shicho, this Mikashi that I'm on now would it wouldn't make really a lot of sense. Just while we're here, Cody Corbin asks, I was wondering what, if any, parts of Shicho transfer into Mikashi, Soresu, and Ataru. That is the question there, and yeah, the easy answer is all of them. As well as everybody said, Ed especially really nailed it there. It is the foundation of anything you would ever really do with a saber. So yeah. Okay. So Yeah, do you want to move on to the next form, or do you want to? Anybody have anything else to add about Shicho?
Yeah, right
I
before we move on, that question. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, Dave.
no worries.
The question: each form in order actually developed mostly, especially in the first four, from the previous form, according to the canon, which is no longer true because somebody said that the EU doesn't exist. One pretty much caused two to happen, two pretty much caused three to happen, and three pretty much caused four to happen. If you look at them, you've got basic box, like Gary said, okay? And I like that analogy. Makashi's a line because the center of the box is empty, and the weakest point of defense in Shicho is the center line. A stab move is very hard to defend. Makashi is like modern fencing, stab, okay? So to defend that, you get all these circular motions, parries, deflections, Suresu, but it's purely defensive. There's not much aggressive energy. Ataru comes and solves that problem using acrobatics and fluid motions as an offense instead of a defense. So they actually, according to canon, developed fluidly. Dave?
Yeah, I was also going to touch on that. Is if you're looking at the TPLA system for those, your footwork is going to transfer heavily throughout all the forms. So if you don't have a good base of footwork within Shicho, don't move to Makashi because you're probably going to hurt yourself. And then your basic blocks and rotations, those are gonna transfer through as well. So do that. Once you're good with two-handed Shicho, try one-handed Shicho because that's going to help you transition to Makashi for your one-handed control. Those types of things will help you with your movements.
Excellent. Cool. Gary?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is something about the sort of the movement really. One of the things that you learn with doing Shicho is how to make the saber and your body work together in concert. Your movement, as you're going through your strike, as your strike ends, your body, is in its final position. Everything is working together. Everything is moving together. You have to have the two synchronized. That is something that is going to translate through when you move into Makashi. You really have to do that. If the two things are out of sync, unless you're doing it deliberately for some reason, it's going to mess the whole thing up. So and certainly when you're getting, the acrobatics of Ataru, you're really going to have everything working together and tightly coordinated. Otherwise, you're just going to end up on your head. So, and not in a good way. So the progression through is with as much with the movement of saber and body together as anything else, I would say.
Excellent. Yes, thank you, sir. Okay, well, I don't know. Do you want to talk about any specifics of Shicho, or shall we move on to Makashi?
There's the only specifics I would say is that you really need to not look past Shicho. The importance of basics is something that a lot of people overlook. They get to the point where they can make that strike 10 times in a row and they think that that's good enough, or they have that importance. They don't understand the importance of basics. Now, your basics are something that you should be practicing way more than you practice your advanced stuff. If you're looking at, I want to be good at Ataru, I want to be good at Makashi, well, your base is going to weigh heavily into your advanced step and your advanced stage. So you should, as well as practicing your advanced stage or your next form, you should also be practicing your Shicho.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well said. Okay. Any last minute chimings in on Shicho before we move on to Makashi here? Thank you, gentlemen. All right. Well, the next form is Form 2, Makashi. Generally one-handed. I'm on Makashi right now as my focus of study, and Count Arcanus also. Where there are many of us on Makashi right now. It seems to be a pretty tricky thing to grasp once you get Shicho, because it really does kind of just skew it all like that. And yeah, anyway, who is first on the docket for Makashi? Man, there's that cricket again.
Okay, well, I'll jump in first on this one. Basically, what you got with Makashi is you've got an outgrowth of Shicho. You've got something designed according to the EU. You've got something that was designed specifically to defeat Shicho. So you've got something that is very, very linear, goes in straight lines, kind of shortest route to attack. Again, I've done a little sort of rundown just to sort of remind myself. You've got something that's dueling centric as well. It's something. The sort of the backstory of it has it that it was designed for an age where lightsaber duels were far, far more common. So you've got something that is very dueling centric. You've only got to watch Count Dooku to see that. You've got something that's very precise. It's very refined. It's more complex and subtle than Shicho. Shicho has been described as a little bit of a bulldozer. Makashi is more sort of precise and refined and tricky than that. You've got a style that is about your timing, it's about your distancing, about trapping your opponent. Again, as I said before, it's very, very linear. I tend to think of it as a bit of a counter-punching style, in the sense that you're kind of reacting to your opponent. You're kind of trying to elicit certain actions so that you can make certain reactions. It is largely one-handed, although can be done two-handed as well. We've been told. So you're looking at something that isn't going to hard block anything coming from the opponent. It kind of deflects, pushes things to the side, and then uses that to create opportunities. You present a minimal target. One of the things that me being a bigger guy has been a bit of an issue with when it comes to Makashi is trying to stay very, very side-on and give as little target area to my opponent as possible. That's something I've found quite hard, especially considering that's if you're thinking two-handed with Shicho, that's kind of almost the opposite in that instance. You're trying to maximize your opportunities as well. Now, one other thing that, again, that occurred to me shape-wise is the cones in Makashi. And, one of my, how accurate this is, I can't really say, but one of my own sort of thoughts on this is that you have kind of two cones going on. You've got your sort of cone of protection, which is kind of, in your moon guards, where you've got your blade on a central point, and then you're rotating around and behind that. And then you've got a cone that goes out the opposite way, where your hilt becomes the center point, and then you're sort of rotating your blade, which kind of gives you a cone of attack, is the way I sort of think about it. Obviously, it doesn't always work like that, but I can certainly see these two shapes when I'm going through my own sort of movements. So yeah, that's kind of about all I've got on Makashi.
Thank you. Okay, Dave, you want to take it?
Yeah, I'll go. When I think about Makashi, I don't just take it from the sport fencing methodology that a lot of people pull from. My belief and understanding is a lot of it is the rapier style fencing from Spanish, Italian influence in the Renaissance kind of periods. Now, they use a lot of the same basic cone type movements for deflection, but a lot of it was not as side-on, straightforward movement as you would expect. They did a lot of move to the side and take somebody's head off, poke them in the neck, jam their leg, do things that are necessary for you to win kind of mentality when you're fighting somebody with a weapon. And in the end, it's about staying alive as much as it is about winning the point. So when it comes to that, I've been doing some study on my own on rapier style fencing, Spanish mostly just reading books and PDFs that I can find on the internet. I even went out and purchased a rapier. I'll go and grab it in a little bit. And it allows me to move and understand how I would change my balance or move my strike to make that work. And I've also started to try and adapt myself to doing the things that we do with the saber and trying to practice that with my rapier. And it's a little bit of a challenge because the weight balance is a little bit different. And I use that kind of approach to do that. To counter Gary's point on it being a counter-punching form, I do counterattack, but I try to force my opponent to attack where I want them to, and that's part of what he said as well. But also to do things like doing a lot of body feinting, foot stomping, things that will force people to move where I want them to attack how I want them to throw off their timing. I think that's a big part of why it's called the contention form, is because you're literally forcing somebody to do exactly what you want them to do, and to kind of bring them into range or bring them into measure so you can take them out.
Yes, definitely. And I don't know. Do you want to go 3 apprentices and then master? It seems to be a kind of a good order to go. Okay, so yes, yeah. Makashi. What I like about it, or what I've been working on the most about it, which is the most difficult for me, is the footwork and stances, of course. Because you're right, it is very much a line, so you always pretty much want to have the side facing, sort of a back leg, foot perpendicular to the camera right now. I'd say front foot 45 to straight on, I guess. That's what I normally end up doing. Both feet always flat on the ground. Hard core stance, low but still straight up, and explosive. That explosions are very necessary. So it's yeah. I never really considered myself a dancer. I sucked at dancing. To be honest with you, I did the yeah, what would they call that in Saturday Night Live? The cracker shuffle. The punches, and yeah, I'm not good. Yeah, now I can. I wouldn't.
What are you doing holding a weapon?
Pardon me?
Can't dance? What are you doing holding a weapon?
Exactly. Never give a weapon to somebody who can't dance. Yeah, well, yeah. TPLA kind of taught me how to dance, in a sense. Yeah, it really helped my balance. The legs are just strong. It's stronger than they used to be anyway, and it's just by going slowly. I don't know. A lot of this stuff seems counterintuitive at first, but once you get the swing of it, you know why it's counterintuitive. We are a peaceful society. These are movements of war, and it makes sense. But yeah, it's a great form. I strongly recommend it when you get there. But yeah, basics first. Anyway, Ed.
2 things you just said I'm going to piggyback right off of. You said 2 words in there that made me really happy. Something about go and then the word slowly. Go slowly. And I'm going to use that to answer a question I have noticed from Cody Corbin again. I like that he's asking questions, so props out to this guy. I don't know you, but you're doing the right thing. I have noticed that Makashi footwork is quite a step up from Cheat Show footwork. So I was wondering, is there a way to simplify the learning process of Makashi footwork? There is. Go slowly. It's really the only way to do anything. I was just harping on my 3rd graders. I teach music. I was just harping on my 3rd graders. They just got to When the Saints Go Marching In, and there's, oh, Mr. Lynn, we don't know. Okay, guys. You just need to go slowly, 1 note at a time, one step at a time. Instead of trying to do an entire progression across your yard, work on just the first step. Just getting your first foot to go to the right spot, not too large, not too small, so that you get it right where you need it. Then focus on the next foot. Don't try and do the whole movement all at once. Just 1 foot at a time. So go slowly. And I've talked so much that I forgot my second thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and say this. experience with Makashi is being on the receiving end. Nero, Ataru, Jared, my close friend, is a fencer. He uses Makashi. Surprise. So being someone who doesn't particularly prefer Makashi, I find myself defending it quite frequently. And for those of us who are looking to defend it, watch your center line. Watch your center line. Because if you're doing any other forms, chances are your shoulders are going to be squared, or at least mostly squared, even if you've got one slightly forward. You're presenting much more target space than they are because they've got that one arm sticking out. Watch your center line. Watch for stabs. Be prepared to change, rotate. Be prepared for them to change and rotate because that's important. So yeah, that's me on Makashi.
Thank you, Ed. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get into the nitty gritty of this this form too. It seems quite dangerous. What are some? Let's see. Dave, are you on Makashi too? Forget.
I am. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, of course. And yeah, actually, we have a Makashi-filled panel here. I think we can all speak about this the most here. Yeah, what have been the greatest challenges do you think? Started off that way, perhaps, when trying to do TPLA's version of Makashi.
The biggest challenge for me when it comes to Makashi is actually my feet. I have dancer's feet. I don't know if anybody really understands what that is, but my feet literally do this. When I'm standing, my feet are at about a 40 to 50 degree angle. They're not by any means straight up. And as I move, my feet actually go to what would be essentially like this. I get very, very side on my shuffle. Never had any dance training in my life, and yet I can plie and do all those crazy things with my heels together. All those things lead to issues with my movement because what happens is as I move, my toe on my rear foot will end up pointing backwards. And as I do that, then I end up putting undue stress on my knees, and then I have problems with that. So my biggest focus is making sure that my feet are pointing forward and where I want them to be. And it's as I get into actually moving and my mind kind of drifts and I focus and it gets more into a meditative state as I'm moving, and then I stop and I look down and my feet are pointed in opposite directions. And then I notice, an hour later when I'm relaxing and having something to eat and my knee starts to hurt and I have to go and throw an ice pack on and make sure that I relax myself. But for me, that's the biggest thing. For my training personally is making sure that my feet are set and always are focused.
Cool. Gary, do you want to go next?
Sure. I mean, for me, I sort of alluded to this before. One of my problems is the side-on thing. Being a big guy, I've got a 46-inch chest, so I have a tendency to be a bit too, or I have had a tendency to be a bit too square. I'm also a former Taekwondo guy, so the idea of being completely side-on and sort of aiming at the sides is a little bit kind of. It's not something we did a huge amount of the time. We were usually either front-on or about half side-on, so that's always been a bit of a challenge for me. I have a little bit of an issue with my feet, ironically, in so much that my knees and my toes don't entirely follow each other. My feet point slightly outwards from where my knees point. So I can do some pretty weird things with the angles of my feet as well. Although I tend to find I use roughly a 90-degree angle between lead foot and rear foot. Low stances. I know some of the apprentices. Our friend Grand Moff Saber can do some really, really low stances. I find very, very low stances extremely hard. So that I'm constantly trying to get my stance down and sort of get that whole thing. And the other thing is, perhaps a slightly minor thing, I guess, is the fact I'm actually left-handed, and I'm doing all this sabering business right-handed. So it's not so much a problem when I'm using two hands because I've got both hands on the saber. But with Makashi, which is predominantly one hand on the saber, I'm doing it with my essentially off hand. So you know, that's kind of interesting, but it does give me a way to actually work my left side as well, because I can just essentially turn the whole thing around and work Makashi left-handed, which does lead rather beautifully to that whole sort of scene from Zorro, where it's like, ha ha, I'm not really left-handed, ha ha, neither am I. You know, so yeah, that's kind of the issues I've got at the moment, but I'm working through it.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'd say my main issues with my Makashi were, of course, footwork. I kept lifting up my heel in the back, where I should be actually putting more weight on that, and both feet should always be planted firmly on the ground. Cool. Well, yeah, and then lower the stance. Okay. So every time I get out, and then reaching more is what I had to do there a little bit more of. And then it seems when I practice, even slowly, I'm always kind of adjusting one thing or the other, because I don't know, it's like I can't do the three things at once. Hence the challenge of the form, because when I do, that's when I've been putting enough practice into this where my body is adjusting to everything at once, and it's becoming second nature to me. But yeah, it's it's a long road there, I think. And then yeah, Sundog. Just a brief description of Sundog. Sundog is what a lot of us are doing right now. Sundog is these are exercises by TPLA that sort of have you do what Gary was talking about and earlier with the cones. And sorry, we had a question there in the Q&A, but we'll get to that in a moment. So the Sundog is what a lot of us are working on, and it's not like the Dulon, where it's a series of Sundogs, I guess, if you will. Sundog just works on a step forward, for example, a step forward with a moon guard switch, and then another step forward with another moon guard switch, and then backwards, reverse, go in either direction, across the Z-axis, if you will, or Z-axis if you're American. Sorry. And also, yeah, just a constant focus on stance, footwork, and blade work, and synchronizing everything, which is why all of us are working hard on this, because this is the Shicho of Makashi, if you will, the basics of how the form works. So, yes, Sundog has been a lot of fun, but it's a great way to do it really slowly, and I'm really into slow right now, just like Ed was talking about. If you can do it slowly, you'll be able to do it faster. Even it does present a lot of challenges, though, because it allows you to keep focus, but it's hard to do smooth, if you will, because you're still not supposed to lose the smoothness of the form. So there's a fourth element that can drop out there. So yeah, those have been my challenges with Makashi, is just to keep everything together as a package and do it smoothly and slowly, because I often speed up. It's not what you're supposed to do. Okay, so let's take a look here. All right, we have a question here from Andrew Kippenham, and he asks, one of the features about Makashi style is that it warns one about becoming a slave to form and encourages creativity in its application. Do you think there is a way to promote this while staying true to the Makashi form? I should put the question up there. Just right off the bat, I'll take a stab at this. I say yes. Part of the Makashi contention form is that a lot of the application of Makashi comes through the use of luring your opponent to maybe try to strike you. I always point your saber directly at your opponent. And how long is my blade? Is it a 32? Is it a 36? Is it a 24? Yeah, you can deceive people with that and get somebody within striking range, and then you can use those moon guards and kind of tap the saber. Fluid ripostes are a really good and big thing that we talk about. Well, that has been talked about on the show. So creativity in the application is basically the essential part of Makashi, where you have to creatively have somebody attack you and then sort of overcome that and then strike back, which is how Makashi seems to work the best. So, anybody else here to chime in on that?
Yeah, I can kick in a little bit. The biggest thing when it comes down to it is the form or the application that we have that we study of Makashi for its I guess its formula. There is very little actual striking. Everything is about creating yourself, creating your attack, creating your opportunity, creating your movement. If you look at on the TPLA YouTube page, the Sundog itself, it starts with, practice in your mind where somebody would be attacking from, create your defense, and then create offense from there using motion, using patterns. For myself, when I'm actually sparring against somebody, it's about creating distance or using distance and being creative about what your attack pattern is, where your feet are, how your feet move, leading yourself into something that people don't often understand, and then using that to kind of confuse them while you're moving into your attack. Part of it, that's a big part of it, is not making sure that your opponent is caught unaware is as much a part of Makashi as your cones and your defense.
Sorry about that. Yes, I agree. Ed, do you want to chime in too?
Ed just had to step away, so I guess we can. It looks like Gary wants to talk.
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one as well, because if I can just go back to the question, it was about is there room for creativity and not having this idea of being a slave to form. It's kind of something that I know certainly you and I, Eric, have a musical background. Obviously, Ed does as well. Think of it. It's a little bit like scales in a way. You have scales which are set patterns of notes that you learn, and you learn them in a set sort of way, and a set kind of you learn a set pattern ultimately in the same way that we do with Makashi. But when you actually come to play something, when you actually come to create your own piece of music, or you're improvising or whatever, you have because you learn those tools, you have the facility to then put them together in different orders, create different patterns, different sequences. You're still using the same patterns, the same building blocks that you learn by doing the exercises, but you're using them in a different way, and you're being creative with them, but you've got the tools there to be creative with. And I think, to be honest, I think this is true right the way across the forms, really, with lightsaber. You learn the exercises, you learn the sort of the techniques and the correct ways of doing things, and then once you've done that, you're in a position to actually be creative with those techniques because you've got a good grounding in them. So it's not so much being a slave to form as having a good grounding and then being able to create from that is what I would say. So that would be my sort of take on it.
Yeah, man, hardcore. I understand that perfectly, just with that musical reference. Yes. Well, Ed, did you you're a music teacher, are you not?
Yeah, I am. I did step away for a second, but I was listening, and what I wanted to say, Gary said and Dave said. So I'm good, because they nailed it. Seriously, guys, I don't even think you need me here. I'm proud.
Thanks, man. Okay, well, yeah, let's move on to Soresu then, which is Form 3, known as the defensive form. Hang on, what does Wikipedia call it again? Quickly, just looking up the...
You don't know?
It's...
Brazilians!
And the way of the Minoc.
Minoc, thank you.
Yeah, that's right. Grab onto that windshield and never let go.
There's something out there. No, there's not.
Chewing on the power cables.
Anyway, sorry, just a brain fart here. But yes, the way of the Minoc. I don't know. I haven't really delved too much into it, aside from doing orbits, of course. I guess everybody would probably be interested in Soresu just simply because it is the form that has the most orbits. Ed mentioned earlier in the show that there are lots of circles. The circle to defeat the line of Makashi. So you'll see lots of spinning. Obi-Wan was a hardcore practitioner of Soresu, and apparently he could have walked into a battlefield full of droids, blasting him, and not get hit because of his Soresu. So yeah, I don't know. It's for me, it's kind of a romantic idea. Just walk into a battlefield like that, but yeah, it's I don't know. It's definitely. I can see how it does. From what I've seen with TPLA's material, how it would take the line of Makashi, because it mostly one hand, although there is lots of two-handed stuff in it, it seems, at least according to the demos. But it does take the Makashi idea. I've noticed that a lot of the movements seem to just be cousins to what I've been at least doing in Makashi so far. So. Yeah, it's definitely something to look forward to. It's because I remember how Makashi, for me, modified the Shicho way of thinking, kind of twisted it a little bit, and just by looking ahead a little bit at the demos on the TPLA website, the YouTube channel, yeah, they are going to be twisted yet again, and then we'll talk about Ataru, how it twists those all again, but yeah. Yeah, for me, Soresu is it's definitely going to be a little bit of fun, just because I love spinning my saber. It's kind of what got me into this in the first place. Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to taking everything I've learned and then spinning a saber. It's going to be interesting. Who is next for the Way of the Minot?
I can go. From my perspective now, I'm never really been a saber spinning guy. I'm not the type of person to create pretty patterns. It's not really who I've ever been when it comes to any form of fighting that I've ever done. But the basic orbits and the understanding of how a major orbit transitions into a block, which can transition into an attack, which those types of things are really great as you're learning how those things apply. The biggest thing that I could say is, while you need to understand your blade work, the footwork of Soresu is just as, if not more important. You could move out of the way and save your own life by just not being somewhere when a strike is coming, and you wouldn't even need to have your weapon in the way if you were taking that step back. And if your footwork isn't at par, then, well, you are struggling to get your weapon in the way when you could have just taken a step backwards or a step to the side. And that's just as important with, and I mean that translates as well from Makashi, where a big term in fencing is void or distance parrying. And you all you do is you take that step back outside of a lunge range, and all of a sudden you have a counter parry or a counter attack or a riposte without even touching their weapon. And that's something that transitions really well.
Cool. And Gary?
Hi.
Oh, and Padawan Gabe has joined us as well. What do you think of Soresu, Gabe?
I don't know.
Okay.
I know about lightsabers. I don't know about anything.
I guess you do.
No, I don't.
Well, we'll teach you.
Okay.
Gary?
Yeah, I made some notes on this. Now, obviously, we're getting into an area that is beyond what I've done and beyond my sort of practice level at the moment. But the notes I made on this were, you've got a form which tends to be referred to as being totally defensive. I think protective is probably a better word. It emphasizes protecting yourself, moving the saber all around you in every possible rotation and plane of motion, but using minimal effort so that you're really conserving energy. Part of that is the whole idea of powering your orbits, your spins, from your whole body, rather than them just coming from your arm, just coming from your wrist or wherever. It's a full body kind of thing, and as a consequence, because you're using your whole body to power the spins, you can kind of keep that up virtually indefinitely with minimal effort. The thing about Soresu is, from demonstrations I've seen of our own Master Artorias, you've got something that's incredibly fluid. There's kind of a continuous flow of movement and motion to it. It's a very graceful form, I think. It sort of seems to concentrate on deflecting attacks around kind of like a protective bubble or a protective sphere or circle in a way. I would think of it as being probably quite a passive form, but in the sense of you're not sort of initiating attack. What you're really doing is protecting against attacks. And as I say, from this, I've sort of had these shape ideas in my head all day. You've got a sphere basically, and you are at the center of that sphere. So you've got your I think it's circle of defense and circle of protection, and you're basically at the center of that. You're moving around, using your footwork, using your making sure that you're not in the sort of danger areas, and then you're using your blade as a sort of circular shield around you, so that you're able to stay safe within that circle. And that's kind of where I'm at with my understanding of Soresu.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah, perfect.
All right. And Ed, would you like to chime in on Soresu? Ed is one of TPLA's masters, of course, and I believe he's the master of Soresu himself. So
He's the boss today.
you betcha. Let's hear about this.
Yeah, Soresu is my one of my two master forms that I'm helping with. Vapod's the other one, and it's funny, those two are polar opposites, but that's for another show, like he said. For Soresu, and Gary will really understand this, and anyone who's ever trained in a martial art where you spar, I was the guy in class where when you're doing your sparring, you would throw your technique and it would just graze my gi, and then I'd punch you in the head. So I like to dodge just outside the reach, just outside, so you can you brush just the uniform, and then I snap in really fast with that counter. So footwork, distancing, deflection, it's basically survival. That's all it is. And yeah, it's very pretty, and I do like that part. I do like being pretty. Anyway, you guys hit it. You basically have it, but there's a lot more going on that you will understand the second you actually start to practice it. Now, once we get past, in my opinion, the first two forms, you start moving away from function and more towards form. You know what I mean? Like, it's fancier. And it also becomes a little bit less, how can I say this without making all of you angry? A little bit less directly usable. All of the awesome flowy spinniness looks great, and in smaller units is very functional. But if the guy's just spinning around, leave him alone. Just leave him alone. He'll get tired. He just keeps moving. Just stand there and wait. If all he's doing is defend, wait. Eventually he has to stop. You know, it's just not going to work out that well. And when you're doing all that spinning, if your hand comes over here, this whole side of your body, better watch out. You know? And when it's over here, this whole side of your body, better watch out. So there's, like they said, there's advantages, there's disadvantages, and as you progress away from Forms 1 and 2, the stuff really becomes more about how you're using it and less about the specifics of the canon, if you're talking about sparring at least. If you're talking about, you know, canon and using the force, then it's different. But if you're talking about sparring, you really start seeing a drop-off in the use and more basics. So I could talk about Soresu for like 10 hours, so I'm going to let you guys move on to something else. Otherwise, I'll never stop.
Okay. That was, of course, Ed, TPLA master of Soresu. Okay. Anyway, just before he gets going here. So our last form for the evening is Ataru, Form 4, the Way of the Hawkbat. So there are many practitioners in canon. We have everyone from Yoda to Qui-Gon, I guess, would be a kind of a good polar scale there. Yoda being the most acrobatic Jedi I've ever seen, pretty much. And then
ask a question?
not just yet, dude. And then Qui-Gon, who was more stand-up and just very forceful and quick, fast, hard, unrelenting strikes. Make you tired, of course, which kind of hurt him in the end. But yeah, so yeah, I have not even looked at Atari yet, really too much, because of the fact that I'm only on Makashi Form 2, and for me it can wait, because I'll be a while before I get to that. So, but on the other hand, in a minute, buddy. I'll ask me, and then we'll see if you can ask it. But yes, the way of the Hawk Bat. I've never been too acrobatic in my life, and it's kind of daunting at first, it seems, but I don't know. We'll see where that goes. But anybody else would like to join in on Atari?
Yeah, I'll go first. I'll answer. There's a couple of questions here as well before we keep going. First one's from Cody Corbin again. He wanted to state, so long as you learn the form in its entirety, if you see a place where your moves could fit, is that all right to add? Yes, and well, I would say yes. There's really no reason why you couldn't fit something in within a form. I mean, you can do it. As you're using it, if you're talking about applying it to combat, when you're actually fighting somebody, absolutely, there's no reason why you couldn't. If you're talking about within the actual form itself, within the formula, I would say no. Primarily because the formula is there to teach you what you need to know about the form. When you're using it actually in combat or in display or whatever it is you want to do, absolutely you can always fit something in. It's about creativity as opposed to formula. But when you're training the formula, study the formula. And the second question was it's actually about Form 4 from Soder Themis. He says he was watching Form 4 videos on YouTube, and he wants to know how he would do this since he's got a back injury from military service. So I'm 6'3" and 330 pounds. I'm a big guy. So Ataru is a hard fight for me. And I definitely understand. The injuries are great. Injuries are very hard to work with. Don't ever do something that your doctor tells you can't do. So if you want to start doing this kind of training with rotations and that type of thing, talk to your doctor, talk to your physiotherapist, make sure that they're okay with you doing it, because that's the first step. Make sure that you're not going to hurt yourself. Nobody likes getting hurt, and we don't want you to get hurt. So please talk to your doctor first. And then the second bit is slowly. Practice your movement. Start with Suma rotations. Do those first. Do them slow. Do them methodical. Get them to the point where when you rotate, you're not tweaking anything. And then once you get to that, then you can speed up. And you're talking probably 6 to 8 months of 6 to 8 months of training this before you're even looking at speeding up to a point where you could use it in actual application. And as for me, for when it comes to Ataru, I fight somebody who loves movement. Scott or Lord Zythos from the forums is another apprentice, and he loves fighting with Ataru. He loves being very mobile. He's also 6'5" and about 200 pounds. He's a big guy. And when we fight, he uses a lot of movement. Now, would I say that it's Yoda Ataru? No. Would I say that it's Ataru? Yeah. There's a lot of heavy movement to generate power, and that's the biggest part of Ataru that I've ever seen is this. And then the last, we actually just had a question pop in. Can girls do this routine? Absolutely. We have 3, 4, 5, 6 girls in River City Jedi that I can think of right off the top of my head that are constant and are always there. They train just as hard or better than some of the guys do, and they are very good. I know that Master Nero's girlfriend is a fencer, and she also does saber fighting with him. I'm not sure if Ed's girlfriend has picked up a saber to fight with him yet. No, she will eventually when he gets tired of his shenanigans, I think. But those are things that they definitely can. There's really no reason why you can't. Any girl can do it. Anybody can do it.
Well said, sir. Cool. Well, thank you. And Gary, did you want to give us your thoughts on Form 4, Ataru?
Sure. Yeah. I'm going to go straight to my notes on this. I mean, you mentioned Yoda and Qui-Gon as, in a sense, two kind of polar extremes for Ataru. Two of the people that I'd like to mention are Kazandarach and Venzalo, both of which appeared in the sort of Star Wars: The Old Republic Deceived trailer, and both of them are jumping around, spinning around. They've been called out numerous times as Form 4 stylists. They're probably somewhere between Yoda and Qui-Gon in terms of the fact that they are being more acrobatic. There's a lot of spinning going on. The notes I have on Form 4 are, it's very proactive style. You're emphasizing power generation by body movement, by doing your spins and your rotations. Agility, obviously, relative to what your own body is. I mean, I weigh, in excess of 110 kilos, which is about, 220 plus pounds. I'm only 5'9". So, I'm very, very unlikely to be jumping off walls. So you've got an agility element to it. Unpredictability is something else which I sort of picked up on, because whenever watching Yoda's example, you never quite know where he's going to be next, in fairness. And I think if you're moving around that much, it's going to make you difficult to track. The idea of it seems to be about overwhelming your opponent with all of your movement and your agility and your rotation and the amplitude of your attack, because you're generating a lot of power by rotating like that. It's kind of got a continuous flow to it in a similar way, I think, to Soresu, but it's much more of an offensive and attacking style. And it will eat up energy reserves a lot faster, because you're obviously, jumping around a lot more. And the last little thing is, again, I would say I've been having these shapes in my head all day. It seems to me Ataru is a bit of a spiral. You've got yourself at the center of it, where you're sort of like rotating around, and then your blade and everything else is kind of going on around that, so you get this kind of spiraling effect. And it strikes me almost like a sort of a whirlwind that blows everything else aside, and it really does push what you physically are capable of as well. So yeah, that's my kind of take on Ataru.
Excellent. And we only have a couple more minutes left in the show here, but Ed, a few last minute words about Ataru here?
Yeah, I'll give you less than a minute of words. It's not what you think it is. Yeah, I'm done.
Thank you. That's yeah. Well said. I can't top that. So okay, we have one last question here before we call it a night. But it's from Andrew Parker, and he asks, is stimulation of the mind needed to perform these techniques? Or is a mental stimulation of the mind needed to perform these techniques? I would kind of take that not in the way you might see in Star Wars, but definitely. It's more of a focus where you have to try to be aware of everything from your toes right up to your hair, basically, and everything in between, how everything's moving, trying to get everything moving in synchronous order. So yeah, in a sense, it is kind of using your full mind to take control of your body and just get everything to work in unison, which is much harder than you think. But that would be yeah. I don't know. That's it's definitely something you have to try harder and harder. It's just keep your focus from start to finish. And I don't know. At first, I used to get carried away, start spinning the saber instead of doing the routines, and you know, yes, yeah, focus and determination, practice, patience, and perseverance. Like TPLA has said since day one. Any last minute? Our time's up, gentlemen. But any last minute parting words?
The only thing I would say is just a part answer to that question that you had, as well as you start, it's a very focused idea when you start. You have to be focused on what you're doing and focused on your training. Your mind needs to be there 100% of the time. As you train, it can be as you train and as you train farther, it can become a almost like a meditative state. When you're training, the basics, when you're training a Dulon or those types of things, it can become almost transish, and then you can train as you go. And those are great to record, because you never know, in that situation, you probably aren't even thinking about what you're doing, and you might kind of impress yourself as to what it is that you've done. But it's good to start very much every session, start as you go, thinking about everything you're doing, and then kind of let yourself flow a little bit before you're finished.
Excellent. Thanks, sir. Gary, any last minute parting words here?
Yeah, I think for me, the one sort of thing that I would say is with all of this. I mean, it's a lot of fun looking at the first four forms, talking about them, watching the videos and what have you. But I think it is important to sort of take things as a progression, sort of step by step, and not be in too much of a hurry. And I speak from personal experience. This is something I've tended to be a little bit guilty of. Don't be in too much of a hurry to kind of progress and race through things. Just work each thing, in its own time. Get it right. Get it settled in your body, in your mind. It is very much a mental thing, as Dave was saying. You and as you were saying as well, you have to pay attention. You have to make sure that your mind is involved in what you're doing, because you're learning at the end of the day, and that is as much in your head as it is in your body. But take everything, one step at a time, and progress through the forms in the sequence that they come, because you're adding on layers of skill, you're adding on layers of understanding, and the end result will obviously be far superior than if you're sort of skipping ahead kind of thing. So that's has been a bit of a personal lesson for me, and it's something that I think is important to mention.
Definitely. Yep. Yeah, you can't skip ahead to Soresu until you have Shicho and Makashi down pat. Otherwise, Soresu is not going to work. And that's why I'm still on Makashi, because I have not quite, I'm getting there, quite got what it takes to get to the next step. But that's why we practice, and that's why we keep going. So if you're learning these forms, if you're studying the TPLA material, don't be discouraged if if you're on Shicho for months. That is a good thing, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. Progress slowly and just get it done, but don't move on until everything's proper, even if that takes a long time. But anyway, that's more than enough time for tonight's show. Again, I'd like to thank the panel tonight. Again, we have Count Arcanis, Master Artorius Vidnal, we have Ed, and David Orthonalan. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and I'm your host, E-Rock. On behalf of Terra Prime, we'd like to thank you again for joining us, and happy sabering. May the Force be with you.